Hi, welcome back to my channel, or a very warm welcome if you're new here. My name is Sophie, and in today's video I'm going to be chatting to you about all of the books that I read in April, and that is this big stack here of 7 books plus an audiobook. And honestly, I'm not really sure how I managed to read this much in 1 month, especially when some of these books are pretty chunky. So yeah, like this one. So yeah, 7 books and 1 audiobook, and this amounts to just over 3,000 pages, and then the audiobook was 16 hours. So yeah, it is a miracle I managed to read this much. I know that April feels like quite a long time ago now, and yeah, we are approaching the end of May. I just need to get better at doing my monthly wrap-ups, as they have become later and later in the month. So I would like to get them closer to the end of the month in which I read the books. So I'm going to work on that and try and get my wrap-ups posted closer to the end of the month. So you may remember back to my April TBR that I was actually letting you pick my TBR. So I'd taken book suggestions from your comments and put them on my TBR, and I have to say that resulted in a really exciting reading month for me. And I actually managed to read everything except for 1 book. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to finish Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I did start this, but yeah, I just had to prioritise another couple of books before we got to May. But I do intend to finish this one very soon, so hopefully it will be in my May wrap-up, or if not, I will try and prioritise it for June. April was also Magical Readathon month, and I'm pleased to say that I managed to read all the books required for my classes, so I passed the semester. So I'm looking forward to doing Magical Readathon again in September. So let's get into this wrap up because there's a lot of books to get through. So the first book I read in April was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I did this one in audiobook format. So actually I don't own a copy of this. I did borrow the audiobook from Libby, but the reason I wanted to read this one, even though I don't own it, is that I wanted to go and see the film. So I always like to read the books before I go and see the films. And it also did work quite well with a Magical Readathon prompt. So that is why I read Project Hail Mary, and I did read it, and then I did see the film. And I will actually add a little bit of footage from a visit to Foyles in London, as they had this whole Project Hail Mary like stand set up, and you could actually go into the spaceship. So yeah, I will include that footage as well. And yeah, overall, I did enjoy it. I did give it 3.5 stars. So this is the first Andy Weir book that I've read. And the story follows Ryland Grace, who is a former science teacher come astronaut, and he wakes up in space with amnesia, and he doesn't even know his name and doesn't know why he's on this spaceship. And sadly, he finds the bodies of 2 of his colleagues on the spaceship, and he has to try and piece everything together and work out firstly who he is, and then also why he's on the spaceship. He then discovers that he is on a one-way mission to save the world from something called astrophage. And this is a sun-eating alien organism which is slowly destroying the sun. So because of some of Ryland's research as a scientist and science teacher, the government think that he can help find a cure for this astrophage, and they have then sent this mission into space, and it's not going to come back. So he is now responsible for saving humanity, and it's a very interesting read because he's kind of coming to terms with the fact that this is a one-way mission and he won't be returning, and also trying to work out why it's him on this spaceship. And it's really interesting for the narrative because we slowly discover more about why he came to be there, and also his background and what led to the events of the spaceship taking off into space. So I did find this one a little bit tricky to get into, as it is very science heavy. So a lot of scientific terms that I didn't understand. So I decided that I was just going to go along for kind of the ride and not try and understand all of the scientific stuff that was going on in this book. And I did enjoy this one. I did like the narrative style, so you also switch between the past and the present, and actually I do really like these kind of narratives where you are discovering what's happening through the eyes of the narrator, so they also have no prior knowledge. I kind of like those sort of books right now. And without giving too much away, there is an alien in this book called Rocky, and I absolutely love Rocky. But this did kind of shift the trajectory of the novel slightly, so it does feel very much a novel of two halves. So the first half very scientific based, and then the second half is a little bit more like unbelievable things happening. So yeah, that was quite an interesting thing in this book. But it has definitely made me eager to pick up more of Andy Weir's books. But yeah, I'm not really into the science heavy aspect of this book. So I did overall enjoy this book, and I did enjoy the film as well. Then the next book I read was The Sun and the Starmaker by Rachel Griffin, and this was my 5-star read for April. I loved everything about this, everything about the reading experience. It was truly a magical experience, and I kind of devoured it over a few days. And I didn't really expect any less from Rachel Griffin. I've read her books and loved them before, but those are more focused on witches, whereas this one is very much fairy tale focused. There are elements of magic in this one, but it's more fairy tale grounded. So this story is set in a little snowy mountain village called Reverie, and the village is dependent on the magic that the mysterious Starmaker brings. So every morning he pulls the sun in across the glacier, and this enables the people in this village to survive, as otherwise they would be living in constant darkness. So Aurora Finch, our female main character, has grown up with stories of the Starmaker since she was a child, and she is enamoured by these stories, but never does she think that she will ever meet the Starmaker in person. However, on the morning of her wedding, she has an encounter with the Starmaker, and he senses great magic within her, and he then forces her to come and live with him in his ice palace so that he can train her with magic to become the next Starmaker. So she basically has no choice. She has to leave behind her family and her fiance to go and train with the Starmaker. And at first he is very distant, she is very unhappy, and the castle where he lives hides a lot of secrets, along with him hiding himself as well. But gradually Aurora learns more about him, and the Starmaker has never really met anyone like Aurora. She asks quite a lot of questions. She's very eager to find out more about everything, and this does infuriate him to start with, but they do grow closer and their attraction builds. And this one did feel very much like a fairy tale, and yeah, as I said, I loved every minute of this, and I would highly recommend this one if you love fairy tale stories and you just want something truly beautiful to read and get lost in this fairy tale world. Highly recommended, and it does also live up to the expectations of this beautiful cover and this beautiful sprayed edge edition. So yeah, I'm really glad that I enjoyed this one, and it does cement Rachel Griffin as an author by author for me. So next I read Queen of Faces by Petra, and I gave this one 4 stars. And I think this was designed that you can read it as a standalone, but it is the first book in a planned trilogy, I believe. Although I think, yeah, it does work as a standalone. I really enjoyed this one, and I thought that it was a very original epic fantasy. This one did have a very interesting setup and interesting magic system. So everybody in this world has a pith, which is their soul, and this can be transferred to a different body. And this is set in a divided nation of Kaymor. So they have the very wealthy and then also the very poor. So the very wealthy can trade their bodies and they can become immortal by having these luxury custom-made bodies that enable them to live forever. But on the other hand, there is also extreme poverty where people have failing bodies and they can't do anything about it. So our main character, Annabelle, is somebody who has already changed bodies, so she's not in her original form. She is changed into a very cheap Edgar body, which is what they call these kind of bog standard bodies. So she had to change out of her original body due to an illness and into this male Edgar body, which is now failing her. She has magic and her magic is kind of burning out this body. So she is running out of time to survive, and the only way that she can afford to buy a new body is to be accepted into the prestigious Paragon Academy, which is a school of magic. and she has tried desperately to pass the entrance exams, but she hasn't been successful. So she is now out of options, and she ends up getting an opportunity to become an assassin for Kavor, who is one of the most powerful dark mages at Paragon Academy. So she ends up becoming an assassin for him, and she also meets Wes, who is hiding secrets of their own. And I found this one to be very fast paced, so the action kind of happens pretty much immediately. I really liked Annabelle's character arc, so I feel like she had a lot of character development in this book. And Petra did such an amazing job writing these characters. I feel like they're very detailed, and it really feels like these characters are coming to life on the page. There was quite a lot of body swapping in this, which was very interesting, but did become quite confusing. But I wonder if this is intentional from the author, as it kind of builds this world where you can't trust anyone, you don't know who anyone is, they could be somebody else in a different body. So I thought that was quite an interesting idea. And also I love the fact that this book was very transcoded, so you can see that Petra has put in a lot about her own experience as a trans woman into this book. So I would really recommend this one if you're looking for a different type of fantasy to what you normally read, something a little bit original and unique, and I am really interested to see more books in this series. So next I received an arc of Honey in the Wound by Jiyoung from the publisher, and they did kindly send me a finished copy once this book was released. And I really love this book. I gave it 4 stars, and it was just a beautifully written story and had elements of magical realism, which I loved. I think the only reason why I didn't give this 5 stars is it was quite dense historical fiction, and I feel like there is a character that we're introduced to at the beginning, and she is in it for a very short amount of time. I would have liked to explore that character a little bit more. So this is an intergenerational epic set in Korea, and also I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the history of Korea either, and this one has been eye-opening for that. It's given me so much information about Korea's past and also its relationship with Japan and what went on during the wars there. So this one does span a large time frame, so 90 years of this one family, but each part focuses on a different female character who has specific magical abilities. So we have a sister who disappears and she returns as a tiger, and this is the character I would have loved to see more about. And then we have a mother who can compel the truth from anybody else. Then a granddaughter who divines in her dreams, and then I would say probably the main character of this story, Jiyoung, who has the power to influence feelings with her cooking. So we do focus on the other 3 women very briefly, and Jiyoung, her part forms the most of this book. So this one is quite hard hitting. There are very brutal moments, and it is very graphic and descriptive of violence that is done to these characters in this. So yeah, I would just keep that in mind if you're wanting to read this one. So Jiyoung is cast adrift when the Japanese Empire bring devastation to her family, until her gifts are noticed by a Korean resistance fighter, and he takes her away to Manchuria, and then she ends up tangled up in this network of spies. So this was absolutely beautifully written, and it is a very good blend of historical fiction and magical realism. I love the magical elements. I love the fact that each of these women have their own magical gifts. So this one, as I've said, is quite graphic, and it was not an easy read. So it does focus on kind of generational trauma and how the brutality of the Japanese Empire reverberated through this whole family and caused them all trauma. And it does really depict the violence that these women face at the hands of men in war times. So I did also find out about comfort women in this book. This is something I haven't come across before. And this is Korean and Chinese women who were forced into sexual slavery for the members of the Japanese Imperial Army. And kind of the latter half of this book does deal with the trauma that that's caused for our main character and how she has overcome that. But reading that section was absolutely heartbreaking, and yeah, I just thought this was such a brilliant novel, and the author really doesn't shy away from showing everything in its devastating detail. But the end of this novel does bring hope. So despite all the horrors and brutality faced, it shows how women can be resilient and overcome this. So I would highly recommend this if you like historical fiction and also if you like it with magical realism elements. Then I read A Stage Set for Villains by Shannon J. Spann, and this one I think I would say I would give it 4.5 stars. It's not quite a 5-star, but it did come very close. So this one has a travelling playhouse which is run by godlike performers called players, and mortals can compete for the chance to kill one of these players and take their place in the playhouse. So we experience the world through 18-year-old Reven Hesper's eyes, and she had an encounter with an unknown player when she was younger, and the touch from this player has cursed her and she is dying from this curse. And in order to help find a cure, she has pretty much done everything she possibly can to find a cure, but in order to find a cure, she infiltrates the playhouse and ends up meeting Jude, who is the lead player, and he makes a bargain with her that she has to help him and he will help her find a cure. I did really enjoy this one, and again, like Queen of Faces, I thought this one was very unique. Although it has been compared a lot to Caraval and the Night Circus, this one is a lot darker than those, and I did really enjoy that aspect. So this is very much a dark fantasy, and at times the players are written as genuinely terrifying. And yeah, I thought this was really interesting because I think she's taken inspiration from Greek tragedy. So this one does read very much like a play, so each section is a different act and scene, and I thought that was a really interesting way to write this book. And there's also dialogue which is written like it would be in a play. So this book does really feel like an actual performance, like you are seeing something on stage. So that was really interesting. And I think what is astonishing is this book is a debut novel, and I think it was just amazing as a debut. So I'm really interested to see what more Shannon J. Spann is going to write, because I want to read it. There were quite a lot of twists and turns, and this one was very cleverly written, but I think the first half was stronger than the second half, so I did kind of get a little bit lost at some point during the middle, where I don't think I was really understanding the intentions of Shannon J. Spann and what she was trying to get me to understand from these sections. So I think this one will really benefit from a second, more detailed read, as I think I've only just scratched the surface with this one. But again, this one was very well written. I loved how she'd written the narrative. I thought the characters were really well fleshed out as well. So yeah, I would recommend this one if you are looking for a dark fantasy. Again, a fantasy that's a little bit different to the normal fantasies that we're seeing. And then I did end up veering off the planned TBR, and this book is probably the reason why I didn't manage to read Northanger Abbey. But I had an event at Alexandra Palace, and Natalie Haynes was talking about her book No Friend to This House. So I have seen Natalie Haynes talk about this novel before, but it was very interesting and I wanted to go again, and I had a really good time again. But I wanted to read it this time before I went to the talk. So I absolutely love Natalie Haynes' writing. I did end up giving this one 4.5 stars, so it was good. It just wasn't quite as good as Stone Blind, which is Natalie Haynes' Medusa retelling. But again, Natalie Haynes is just such a great novelist. I love how she has so much knowledge about what she's writing about. So she has been a fan of Medea. So this one tells the story of Jason and the Argonauts and Medea, and what kind of led her to murder her own children. And Natalie Haynes has talked about in her talk how she has loved Medea since she was a teenager, and you can really see that. So I just love the fact that Natalie Haynes splits this in two point of views from a lot of characters, even very minor characters. So we get to see what they think about it. So the first part was really focused on Jason and the Argonauts and the adventures of the Argo. And then we go into what led to Medea murdering her children and what happens after that event. And yeah, it was just beautifully written, and I love the writing style of Natalie Haynes. She always brings comedy as well to these novels, and I just love Natalie Haynes' writing, and again, a really good one from her. So I would definitely recommend this if you love Greek mythology, in particular if you're wanting to read a bit more about Jason the Argonauts and Medea. And then I read Weavingshaw by Heba Al-Wasity, and I gave this one 4 stars. I did enjoy it, but I don't feel that it quite fulfilled the promise from the blurb. It was a little bit different to what I had expected, And yeah, that is on me, not on the author or this book. But yeah, it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but it is a really interesting story. And I have to say, the start was really good. I got lost in the midsection, and then the ending was really, really good. So this is set in a world where it's kind of a monarchy rule, and our main character Lena is a refugee from, I can't remember what the name of the place is, but her family are refugees from there. And I think the author has taken her own experiences as an Iraqi refugee and kind of reimagined them into this fantasy world, and I thought that was really well done. That was a really interesting aspect in this, and you did really feel like she was bringing her own experiences through in this novel. So as I said, our main character Lena is a refugee, and then we also have this character called St. Silas who trades secrets. So he takes people's secrets and then he'll give them something in return. So our main character Lena has a secret that she has not shared with anyone, and that is that she can see the dead. And I thought that was really interesting, and that really added to the gothic atmosphere that was in this book. But she needs a cure to save her brother's life, so she ends up going to St. Silas, trading her secret, and it is very valuable to him. So he gets her to work for him, and he is looking for a specific spirit to find out about a mystery that surrounds this place called Weavingshaw. So I did think that we would get to Weavingshaw a lot quicker than we did, so it was quite a long time until we actually saw Weavingshaw and were at Weavingshaw. So yeah, I think that was probably part of what I was expecting a little bit more. So there were a lot of elements that made this a gothic fantasy, and I did really appreciate those. But I think this novel, its downfall probably is that it tried to do too much. There was so much in here. And I do believe this is actually a series. So originally I thought it was a standalone, but it is a trilogy. So that kind of explains the slow start. But I thought that was actually good because it really did build the world. And also this is a slow burn romance. And actually I thought that that was really well done in this book, because in a lot of romanticises that I've read, the romance kind of happens immediately and there's no reasoning behind it. But in here, it did really build. It was a very slow burn romance, and I did enjoy that aspect. But I know that romantasy and dark fantasy readers are gonna absolutely love this book. So I would recommend it. Although it wasn't quite what I expected, I did actually enjoy it. So I am looking forward to continuing the series. So then the final book that I read is one that I started back in March, in Mythology March, and this is the Iliad by Homer, and this is the Emily Wilson translation. And I honestly can't believe I've read this. I never thought that I would read the Iliad, and certainly I didn't think that I would enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm not going to give this a star rating. I said before in my last wrap up about the ancient texts that I found it a little bit difficult to give it a star rating. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say that I did really enjoy this. And I thought that this one was very accessible. So I think that is to do with the translation. But I would like now to read other translations of the Iliad. So I don't want to just read it once. I want to read it multiple times. But that's good because there is so much depth in this. And I can really see why it has lasted as a core text. But Homer does go into so much detail. So there is quite a few pages where he's literally describing every single aspect of every single ship that is sailing to Troy to take part in the battle. And then there's so much detail about who everyone is, who's their father, who they're son of, who they're related to, what they're wearing, how they're fighting, how they're dying in battle. So there's so much detail about the fighting, which I guess is actually the whole point of this book. But what I think surprised me most about this is there is no Trojan horse in this, which I was expecting it to be mentioned, but it's really not in there. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is part of kind of a cycle of novels. So this one, the Odyssey, and then I think there were others that are lost. So perhaps that happened in one of those lost texts. But what I love the most about this is how the gods are kind of playing with all of the mortals. So this war is pretty insignificant to them, and they're fighting amongst themselves to decide which side should win, who is the best fighter, which of the gods is the best. And they're kind of really toying with these mortals' lives, and it's, as I said, insignificant to them, but for the mortals it is their life, and I find that really interesting, and that's something that I really enjoyed in this. So it was really interesting to see that juxtaposition of the gods who are seeing this as entertainment and the mortals who are basically fighting for their lives. And yeah, I can definitely recommend Emily Wilson's translation. As I said, I want to read more. So if you have read the Iliad in a different translation, then do let me know which one that was, as yeah, I hope to read this again. But yeah, I wasn't expecting to enjoy this as much as I did, so I'm really glad that I did. So that's all of the books that I read in April, and it was a very interesting reading month. So I'm glad that I took some of your suggestions to build this TBR. It was really fun, and I may do this again sometime. So if you check out my hauls or unboxings and there's any books that you're particularly interested for me to read, then do leave that below in the comments and I can collect those and do another version of you picking my TBR. Thanks for watching. Please do like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel for more of my content. In the meantime, if you haven't seen me pick my May TBR, then do check this video out. And if you are wanting to look at my latest book haul, then check this one out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.